I hate it when this happens.
It's fine.
Yes.
So I'm going to start again. Give me a moment. Let me give a brief introduction for you, Laila, if that's okay.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dirac Conversation series powered by The Grey Matter. Today, we have, now that you know, we have Laila Zafar joining us live. Laila is a corporate risk lawyer, and she also is a founder of a support group called The Village for Single Parents. She also runs a podcast called The Village Banter. So, Laila, once again, welcome to Dirac. And
Thank you so much.
I'm going to just
Hello. Completely. Okay.
Am I there? I am really sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's okay. Maybe you want to flip your connection and go to
I've done everything.
4G?
This is the last
Okay, let's
thing. Yeah. Okay, so my question to you was, what led you what led you to choosing law as your career, since you don't really have any legal background and you were born, raised in Dubai with a political science, degree.
Undergrad, yeah. I think I've always liked advocacy, Shreya, and in whatever little way I wanted to try to advocate for a bigger change. I think that was always the idea. And after political science, the only options that I had to study was either do an MA political science and go into teaching or become a professor and then take that route of either research, that kind of work, PhD and all of that eventually, or else it was an MBA or law. So I know what my limitations are. I know I cannot do business subjects at all. I have no idea about that. So for me, advocacy was something that I always wanted to look into. So that's why I went towards law, because it's a good area to get into. I had no background, like you said, obviously zero background. Nobody in my family is a lawyer. And yeah, but it was difficult, but I've not faced any problems because of that.
Wonderful. So, after law school, you went straight for an in-house role in Dubai, which is very interesting because in-house is something which has been coming up now. 10 years back, you didn't really hear lawyers directly going for an in-house role. So, tell us, was it a conscious decision to choose an in-house space for law? It was?
It was. Because again, like I said, I know my limitations and I know that I'm not made for litigation. I was in law school. We had to go to High Court every Saturday to see how it works and to just get a feel of how it goes in court. And right from that day, I knew this is not for me, because to survive in the legal system here, you need that little that, I don't know what to say, but that finesse or that street smartness, which I don't have. I'm a very straightforward person. I don't know how to do this. This delaying of stuff, which happens a lot over consciously without talking smack about the legal system. There's a whole lack of straightforwardness over here, and I was not built. So for me, obviously, non-litigation was the path right from the start. I remember that I was one of the few students exempt me from this. I don't want to waste my Saturdays going to court because I don't want to do it. I don't see this as my future course of action. So he was shocked and he was like, no, you don't have that option to opt out. You have to go. So I had to do it. And by the end of my final year, I was like, even if I have a gun to my head, I'm never going to do litigation. And I haven't. So it was a very conscious decision.
So tell me something, this clarity that you had, I know my strengths and my weaknesses. Was it something that you already had figured out by the time you reached law school, or was it the 5 years? That's what that period gave you time to kind of...
No, I did a 3 years law course at that time. I did my BA in political science. Yeah. And then went into BL, right? So it was 3 years. And my interests, I understood, because 3 years means you have a lot of big subjects right from the start. You don't have that 2-year grooming period to, get into it. So contracts was my interest. Negotiation was my interest. So I knew what subjects I gravitated towards. And why that is important for me is because I have learning disabilities. I'm dyslexic. So for me, I know what my strengths in the study matter is. Maybe it's lacking in my personal life, but when it comes to studies, I know what I can handle. So I know I can't do, hours and hours of research and reading like how, litigation lawyers do. That is not my thing. And so I have to be very clear in what I do with my work, because it is all the more difficult for me with learning difficulties. So I had that clarity right from the start with, as far as my studies goes. I guess I did.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
So, you practiced in-house for over a decade.
Yeah,
Um,
13 years.
and before took the leap and ended into a venture into the consulting role.
Yeah.
How has that experience working as an in-house lawyer shaped you professionally?
Oh my
And
God.
it'll
Yeah.
be great if you could share some learnings from that
Yeah.
experience as an in-house
It
lawyer.
was a whole, because I've never done consultant work, which is, consulting on aspects of the law, or, I've never done that. I've always been very pure risk and contracts lawyer, which is very specific in its niche. So how it conspired was when I came to India, when I landed in India, I didn't have employment. I had left my job in Dubai and I was not able to get any employment here, which, fit my very niche skill set. So I spoke to my ex-boss and I told him, listen, you have to help me out in one way or the other. Otherwise, I'm going to starve, very simply. So he said, this is a thing, because you're not here in Dubai right now. I cannot give you a full-time role that you had before. Look at a consult position. So I was like, I've never done that. It's a complete role change. It's not even like a linear, it's a whole other planet. So I had to learn. It was very difficult. Again, learning for me is a challenge. If I have to start something, means I have to put my 100% into it. It's not like, again, because of my, learning difficulties. So it was hilarious in the beginning, because I wouldn't understand and questions were addressed to me, and I'd be like, why are you asking me that? And I'm like, oh yeah, because I'm the consultant over here now. Because those questions were never asked to me when I'm in the a risk capacity. Before, like, contracts would come to me, I would sit with the team, we would go through it, we would pour over it. Now it's not like that. Now I have to sit and actually look at law points and look at the relevance to that. And risk has taken on a very smaller part there. So it was hilarious in the beginning, and in meetings and all, my boss would be like, Laila, we are asking you the question. We are not, pondering over it. So it was a huge learning curve for me. Huge, massive. Like, I never imagined. But now I think I've gotten into the flow of it, and I don't play a huge role in the nitty-gritty of the work. I do the end product, the analysis of the end product of the contract, for instance, if it is. So yeah, that's life. I mean, different things happen, and I'm quite enjoying it. I will definitely flip back into pure risk role, but for now, this is what is my bread and butter.
So you mentioned about moving to India.
Yeah,
There's a move that you made to Kerala where you started
yeah,
your life, practically your entire life from
yeah,
scratch. Tell us what
yeah.
made you make that move.
So I was already in Dubai with my kid, and my ex-husband had a business here, so he had moved here earlier on. So the plan was that we would move here and be a family here. But I knew from the beginning, living here is not for me. I mean, no offense, but I've never lived here. So I knew it would be, and at my age, I was doing well in my career. Do I want to do this? There was so much confusion around that. But when I came here, and without the security of my job, without any of my usual, support systems around, my marriage couldn't survive that. So I came here to give the marriage a shot, and it didn't work. So I had to sort of disintegrate completely to come back into the person that I am today. So I think my marriage did pay the price for that. But what has to happen will I be moved here, and we've been okay to how things work here, because it's two entirely different, social systems, and as far as people are even. But it's been okay. Touch wood, it's been okay so far. Do you
So
hear? Okay.
yeah, I can hear you.
I think I lost you. Yeah. Okay.
Just please excuse my internet today. I really don't know what else to
No,
do about it.
it's fine. Yeah, I've never seen this with your interviews before. I think it's me.
No, it's got nothing to do with you. It's just the internet. Um,
Okay.
so
Cool. Now it's good.
so
Yeah.
question, Laila. We all know how single parents are looked at. They're looked at a certain way in our society, even now.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
daily basis?
I kind of lost you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
So what I asked you was that
No, lost you completely. If I could at least get a few words, I could patch together something and say, but I lost you completely. Yeah. Yeah, okay, let's go. Okay.
I am so sorry. This is completely breaking the
No,
rapport.
no, it's fine. It's fine. Please don't apologize. It's okay.
So my question to you was, were there any judgments and biases that you had to face on a daily basis as a single parent?
No. No, to be very honest with you, no, I didn't, because I was new here. I didn't know anybody here. No, for the longest time, nobody knew that my ex-husband and I were divorced. Like I told my parents, let me adjust to my life first, and then I will tell people who are important to me. Whoever comes to know from that vicariously, that is different. But just give me that space, because when it's not just me, it's my son as well. When we are adjusting this new life, then we have family. I'm not talking about the society at large. But when family come and they ask questions, if I'm not emotionally prepared for that, it's going to be havoc. I knew that. So thankfully, my parents gave me that space, and they were still in Dubai. So we were here by ourselves, and I took that year off, and it was just me and my kid. And I think the first time I told my aunt, she was shocked. After 6 months of being here, I went back to Dubai again, and my aunts were there, and I told them, see, this has happened, and I wanted to tell you myself before someone else comes there. And she just looked at me, she's like, are you joking? Like, how can it just, I said, why would I joke about something like this, So I personally told people, and I know I did not face any stigmas, because I think, this stigma that you're talking about is very unique to don't engage with those people. So personally, I haven't had to face any stigmas, but definitely other single parents do. I don't know if I'm talking to myself. Oh, you're back. Did you hear anything? Because I did not
No,
see
no,
you
I
even
heard
for a
you.
second. I
I
was
could
just
hear you.
rambling. Oh, you heard me. Okay, you heard me. So I know. So you heard me. So no, I didn't face any societal stigmas. Societal stigmas don't bother me. I don't bother with that, because I was not raised here, Shreya. I'm not. I don't belong to the inner society over here. So for me, my group and my family was very small growing up. So I was not concerned with that. I had very close people in my family. I told them myself. Now, whatever anybody, when it spread from there, that was not my problem. But I delivered the news directly to the few people who are important to me. So I don't worry about those stigmas personally, from my opinion.
That's actually good to know. It's good to hear.
Yeah. It's the absolute truth,
Uh,
though.
Laila, when did you start the support group for single parents? And what was your motivation behind starting this support group?
So when I was in Dubai, I was a part of a support group for single parents there, and I could see that it was doing wonderful work, and it was very important. It was a very important part of my life. Like we would meet up once a month, and there would be a lot of donation drives. It was a much large scale thing. But when I came here, I found that there was nothing, and it was amazing because the number of people that I would meet, not one of them would openly say that they're divorced or even single parents. Like it was a bad thing. I was like, why are people ashamed of this? I'm not ashamed of this. I don't want to live my life hiding or lying to people about my marital status. What is the problem? Let's address it. So, so I used to get told by a lot of people that, no, you won't understand. This is how it is. I said, why is it like this? Don't have to simply accept abuse and say, this is how it is. Question it. But I didn't get any support even from the few single moms that I had met here. They were like, Lala, we are comfortable living in our little inner bubbles. So I said, no, I can't survive like this. So it was actually for me to be able to survive that I started the support group. Otherwise, it's very difficult, Shreya. I mean, you need to have a community. You need to have people who you can talk to, who you can feel, a sense of friendship and family with, which we are denied. and very unfairly so. It's very unfair. So, there are a lot of friendships in the community now. I started in November 2019, after everything had gone through my divorce and everything. So we started very small, but now we have a lot of people in our group and there's so many friendships, and it's just that it's not a lot of work. I don't have to do a lot of work on it. It's just that people, when they ask me, I just give them support. That's it, that you will be okay. That's all that is needed. But the society or whatever it is over here denies us of even that. That is bare minimum. Bare minimum. People are not asking for any great things, Like these extraordinary women, single mothers, if you're talking about. They're working. Most of them are paying taxes. They're all tax-paying citizens. But they're not asking for anything in return in terms of benefits or anything from the government, which I think is just absolutely unfair and ridiculous. Like, I don't know why more people are not talking about this. So when I am the only person who's doing this, and there's no vocal support group which is going out there and talking about it the way I do. So maybe that is because I've not been raised here, so I'm not affected by a lot of things that go on over here. So I can be candid. I don't care about any repercussions on it. Maybe that is there. I don't know. But whatever it is, I'm going to talk about it for as long as I can until some positive change comes. And that change has to come from within the community. Single parents have to, stand up and say, no, sorry, this is wrong. Like, how the LGBTQA plus community, they fought for it themselves. Nobody came and said, sorry, you're gay, we need to give you rights. Nobody's going to give it to you, on a platter, especially not in our society. You have to fight for it. So that's what I encourage single parents. Also, it's okay, live your life. What's going to happen? What's the worst that could happen? Your parents stop talking to you? It's okay. Why do you want parents like that who are going to judge you because you're not married? You'll figure it out. It'll take time. It'll take time, but you'll figure it out. But yeah, it's happening slowly. Lots of single parents are coming out. They're starting their own businesses. They are, interacting and helping each other out so brilliantly. So that is the power of community, Shreya, that when you've been denied something so long and when you get it, I love that. That's my validation. Like when I see people connecting and, they're making each other's lives easier. It's such a great feeling. It's such a beautiful feeling. I can't even articulate it.
How beautifully shared, yeah. Thank you, Laila, for this. And I'm sure whoever needs the message has, gotten the message right where it's needed. So thank you so much for being so candid on this. Also, I'm sure, like you mentioned, right, the support group, the community does provide you a safe space to kind of talk about issues which you wouldn't speak about otherwise.
Yeah.
Would you have some examples about, somebody who approached you via the group and how they transformed their life, or even perhaps how the initiative has been perceived thus far?
See, the support group actually got a lot of support right from the beginning, like right from the press. Like I was shocked wanting to interview me and talk. I didn't understand. I was like, what is the big attention around it? But then I understood that this is unheard of over here. Single moms would just come and they would tell someone to tell them that it's okay. And they've gone so much relief, like if they can't come, maybe they've not come out to their parents or their friends, or they're still in the closet, but they come out to me because that they know that they can trust me and the community and the safe space that we've created. And that is one beautiful example, because I talk so openly about dyslexia and learning disabilities, which I personally have. A lot of single parents have taken their own children to get tested. There's so much taboo around that. So just last week, a mother, she called me and she told me that, after seeing my live around that, she took her son to be diagnosed. He's 13 years old and he's always been complaining about not being able to do it. And when he got diagnosed, she's telling me she cried. So, so when you put out information and make it simple and make it seem normal, like this is okay. I'm living my life the way any other person is living. I'm not unique, or I don't have to be treated differently because I'm a single mom. You normalize it for other people. So I think my intention as being the founder of the village is to give people permission to live their lives. Like if I can do it, anybody can do it. Literally anybody can do it. So just that is how the society also will grow, is if we openly talk about our stories and our lives. It will give permission to people who are not able to do it by their own volition, right? So I have many examples of that.
Since you have the community that you've built up thus far, are there some very common challenges that one faces as a single parent on a daily basis? Can you just throw
Oh
light
my
on a
God.
few?
The major issue we have is always legal. Always. It's always legal. Like there's so many single moms who are yet to find their husband, but they don't, because everyone will tell them this much time. It's going to take that much time. Nobody's going to respect you because you're a single parent or because you're divorced. So all the problems around legality. So so that is my endeavor. I'm looking to also start a sort of a legal platform as well for single parents, because that is where the problem lies. And ultimately, because for maintenance, for custody, for visitation, for understanding those little things, because there's no information out there. There's a lot of smack talk about it. Like people will talk 100 bad things about divorce and single parenting, but nobody's there to sort of put a positive twist on it and say, look, it's not that bad. All you have to do is to sit with someone who is, single parent friendly, who will break it down for you and tell you this is what it is, and be very straightforward about it. Lawyer, like just today, I have a widow. She's lost her husband, and her ex-in-laws are just playing around selling properties and stuff. So I spoke to her on the phone. I told her, look, this is the thing. I'll connect you with a lawyer who speaks your language. Just figure it out. And he explained it to her so beautifully. So beautifully. So again, because of a support group, a lot of people, a lot of lawyers, a lot of doctors, a lot of experts are doing pro bono work only because we have a community. You understand? This is a privilege we've never had. Nobody would even give us like that respect, right? Because they're like, why? You did this to yourself. It's not something anybody does themselves. A divorce is something that could happen to anybody. It's a life condition. It's a human condition. But we are judged for it. So lawyers are doing pro bono work. In Kerala, I have a friend of mine who's a lawyer. She's doing pro bono work. I'm doing pro bono work. So many, mental health doctors are doing pro bono work only because of the community, because they know that for them, this is their place to also grow and practice and do that, So the legality is where the problem lies. Like there's no simplicity in it.
So,
Majority is that.
speaking of the legalities, you being a qualified corporate lawyer, you've had your share of,
Awesome.
kind of, you've been a consumer of legal services in the,
Yeah.
in the domestic front. What, according to you, are some of the things a lawyer needs to keep in mind when they deal with couples who are going through a similar journey?
I think just be non-judgmental. Start from there. This is not your business. We are paying you to do us a service. Unfortunately, I cannot go and walk into the court and say I want a divorce. I have to engage a lawyer services for that. So just be kind. I've heard lawyers. I've not had that experience because I went through mutual. So I just had one person there and I did all the drafting, writing, everything I did. I gave the document. I said, just give it to me. This is it. But a lot of people have contested divorces that go on for years. And then, lawyers in the middle will judge them. Why don't you reconsider going back to your marriage? Why don't you do this for its sake? You understand? So when your personal prejudice comes into the legal field, into your professional life, that is where it affects the lives of your clients. And that is wrong. That is against the whole on which this legal system is. Even if you go by the constitution, the legal system has to be neutral. There is no politics. There is no personal agendas in the legal system, right? But over here, lawyers will say, no, their personal prejudice will come in that. Why are you getting divorced? And it's always towards the women. Why are you getting divorced? Why can't you stay with your husband? So just be considerate. That's all. So that's why I engage lawyers for pro bono, because I know that these people, they know me and they know how I work. So they will follow that similar method of just being kind and being compassionate towards the person who is struggling. See, nobody wants to leave their marriage. It's under dire circumstances and, last resort that a person says, I can't do it anymore. I'm going to get a divorce. So when a person is already so vulnerable, if I'm going to a lawyer, paying him, like an huge amount of money, and then he's judging me, I don't need that. I really don't need that from him. So, be supportive and just come from a place of understanding and just expedite it. Because I have friends who are a very close friend of mine who's been trying to get a divorce for like 8 years now. I think this is her 8th year. Why? I don't get it, and it's so heavily contested and people go missing, witnesses go in, like, see movies. Is this really happening? It is. This is a reality for people. Like, you want to leave this mess of a marriage, but the legal system is keeping me tied to it. For what? And kids are growing, kids are getting impacted. So the legal system, I think, really needs to get a nice shakedown. And, we need to, I've always said this, like, lawyers who do not have compassion need to be disbarred. They need to be removed. They need to do like clerk work or something. Like, do not engage with people. Like, if you don't have that compassion to do this work, don't do it. It's okay, but a lot of people do it for money. A lot of people do it for the wrong reasons. Those people need to be sort of removed. I mean, that's just my suggestion. Obviously, it won't happen, but
and the sad truth is, you wouldn't know you wouldn't know the personality of a lawyer until you engage them. So
yeah, unless you really engage with them. Yeah, and then you're already into it, and it's just madness with the legal system. I think everything else single moms are handling so wonderfully, whether it's their mental health, their children, their money, everything. But when it comes to the law, they just feel like, you know what, I don't care. I just don't have it. Yeah, so that is sad. It shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't be like that.
I'm curious. We've spoken about single moms. Tell me, do you also have single fathers as a part of the community?
Yeah, we do.
How do they handle societal pressure? Because
I think they don't. So it's very difficult to get a single father to talk about what they go through, because I think they also have a lot of conditioning to sort of unpackage there. But I also try to engage with them and help them in any way that I can, at least from a legal front. So I think their challenges are different, and I have empathy for that, because my ex-husband is also a single parent, and I know what he's going through. It is not easy to live as a single father who's denied, maybe, everyone wants to live with their children as much as they can, but unfortunately our legal system, our society is in this matter is wrongly biased towards women. It's a wrong bias. It shouldn't be. It should be completely neutral, right? Like how it is in other, developed countries. But over here, the woman there's no case for, okay, I'm not saying all, but generally, okay. So single dads also, they have no idea about the law. It just boils down to the law, Shreya. Like I've had single fathers who are absolutely clueless. They don't know what to do. They're just stuck and they're hanging from, the noose of their ex-wives' threats. Like, if you don't send me money, I won't show you your kid. Or if you don't, if you don't sign this property into my name. I had an ex-father who had that problem. I think it was last year. He said he had like one property that he got from his father, and his ex-wife was like, I'll give you visitation, not even like custody, if you sign that property over to her name. So he was like terrified. He's scared, because if he says no, is he going to lose visitation? This is where a lawyer comes in. This is where a lawyer should convince the father and say, no, I'm sorry, you shouldn't do it. And be very, no, lawyers will dilly-dally over there. They're like, no, we need proof. Everything doesn't need proof and witness, right? But over here, that is the thing. I've noticed that. I go to court over here with single moms who, find it difficult. And it amazes me. It just amazes me how lawyers are just holding this entire institution, by the nail on their fingers, like just playing people around. It's horrible. So single fathers get no empathy. They get no compassion. And I try to help them as much and try to get them to really talk. But it's a whole other level of unpackaging, right? Because see, men have this place in society, and suddenly when they are painted in a wrong light as having left their partners, or even if that is not the circumstance, they are put in a bad light. So they are also in this gray area. But I try to help them as much as I can, and from my point of view of understanding them, because it's completely different. The struggles are different.
Yeah, and I think a community like yours can probably spread awareness. And see, for men it'll take some time. Because it's a very unconscious, ingrained bias, thinking process that we have for men. So I think eventually
it should. It will all unpackage at some time, but it has to start somewhere. We all have to take, as single parents, I always tell them, the initiative has to come from you. Nobody is going to come and tell you, so sorry, you're divorced, you're a single mom, here, let me give you 10 lakhs, or no, let me give you a job. Nobody is going to do that. In fact, the opposite is going to happen. People are going to take things away from you. You cannot sit back and say, let it happen. You have to get up and fight for it. I have lost so many opportunities, so many job offers, so many. I've stopped counting, because, people judge you. But that is not the end of my life. I have to always sit there and convince them. And there will always be one person who will be like, okay, fine. But for every one person who believes that I can do my job, there are 10 people who are going to say, no, you can't do it because I'm a single parent. That's a job I've been doing for last 13, 14 years of my life, but I have to explain myself over and over again, but I'll do it because that's the only way that things will change. And more people have to start doing it. And it's happening. You know, single parents are coming out, they are talking, and they have now a sort of a community or a fall safe to depend on if anything goes haywire. So I think that support is also there. So a lot of people are propelling and just growing out of their uncomfortable places, hopefully.
So, you're also working on a PIL, which primarily
Yeah.
around including single parents in the social equality laws in Kerala. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And also, are there other countries where there are specific benefits given to single parents?
Yeah, 100%. All developed. See, that's the thing, you know, like that's the funny part, because I have some sort of an outsider's perspective on this. I can see that this is unnecessary, that this struggle and this, you know, discomfort that we inflict on ourselves and the society gives us, it's just so unnecessary. You understand? Like, why on earth should I take abuse from somebody who is not living my life, who's not paying my bills, who has no right to have any opinion on how I live my life? But we do it because that's how we are conditioned. Even in Dubai is a very small country. But when I was working as a single mom, I told my boss and I told the HR that this is the thing. I need different work timings. Can you accommodate me? They said, yes, we will. And I impacted the policies over there and changed the policies to make it more inclusive. See, that is how, that is how it should work. See, corporate consciousness, societal consciousness has to grow. Yeah. You know, it has to grow to accommodate, like, families are not just a male breadwinner and a female homemaker. That was like centuries ago. Policies and everything have to be around different types of families, like single moms, transgender parents. Like over here, we have transgender single parents as well. What about their rights? No, they're not treated at all equally. LGBTQA plus couples. But the law does not accommodate all of that. So we have to make ourselves small to fit in that, you know, confine of what the law allows. It shouldn't be like that. It should expand, you know, social consciousness. So when I took this up with the office over here, and they spoke with me and they said, look, this is very difficult because it's going to enrage religious bodies, religious institutions. They might come after you and stuff. I said, are you willing to take that risk? Because you're the government. If the government does not take an initiative, and I'm just saying I'll put it forward as a pill or a case or whatever you want, but the government has to support at the end of the day. So because benefits are doled out by the government, wherever it is, in UK or the US or Europe, benefits are given from taxpayers' money. We are paying taxes. Single moms are paying taxes. Single fathers are paying taxes. Where are our benefits? And nobody asked this. I'm amazed that nobody has ever asked these questions, you know. So they told me that. So then the lady over there suggested to me that, you know, come back with a pill or a stronger case where you find sort of loopholes. She's helping me out from the side, but she told me this is the thing. Marriage is such a big thing. If you're going to challenge that and say that, you know, I want to add like single parents and make that okay, a lot of people are going to get funny ideas in their heads. They're going to be like, you know, I want to get divorced and I want to be. I said, so be it. If people want to be single parents, if people want to leave their marriage, why are you stopping them? People are staying together because there is no government support. Because I have no support here. When I moved here, I didn't get a job. I didn't get support from anybody. I didn't get nothing. But transversely, if I move to another country abroad, I'll get dollars or whatever in my account for my child. You know, education is free. Everything is free. Till I sort of find my bearings. Over here, nothing. I can't even talk about it to anybody. So she was like, yeah, I know. Ultimately, she's like, okay, fine. You work on this pill. You know, we'll help you out as much and we'll figure it out, kind of a thing. So that's what I'm doing. So I have a team of lawyers, students also. They were doing it pro bono because I told them I cannot. Yeah, obviously research I cannot do. So I need people who do research. I hate research. So they are doing the research part of it because the equality laws are already there. You know, Article 14 and 18. Everyone knows that. To find loopholes in those existing laws and just highlight those in the pill and say, this is where we can be accommodated and please accommodate us. So it's very simple things, you know. If it is impacted, if it happens in Kerala, it can be taken to a higher legal system in other states and eventually at a whole national level. It has to start somewhere. And Kerala is a little bit more, you know, compassionate towards social causes and stuff, at least on the paper of it. But let's see, you know, that's the whole. So the lawyers that I've engaged, they're very happy because, you know, it's a socially progressive thing that has never been done before. They're doing the work willingly. So let's see. I mean, I really want to do it because it's very unfair. You know, admissions are denied in schools for no reason. There's no logic or no law. Simply deny admission. Yeah, because you're a single parent. Okay, fine. Landlords do not give apartments on lease. Why? Assumption is you're single, you'll bring men inside, you'll be partying. What is this assumption based on? Only God knows. Nobody knows why these assumptions are made. They're just simply saying it. And this is the experience of a lot of single moms here. So what is the other option? Go back and live with your parents. Why should that be my only option? Am I not allowed to live as an independent human being? Why is my only option to go between my husband and my parents' home? No, I have a life. Why is the government not supporting me to live my own life? Why are companies not expanding their policies to accommodate me? Now, why should I make myself small? So change has to start somewhere. Change has to start at some grassroots level, and it'll happen. It'll happen at some point. I have faith in that.
You know, what is the best part about this conversation is that the community that you founded so nicely is not just about spreading awareness amongst the single parents. Actually, education and awareness is required even by others who are not single,
who are not,
even youngsters for that matter. Because just because we've not gone through a similar situation, that doesn't mean we don't need to know. And I think it's very, very important that this message goes to everyone, because it's only when the thinking of society changes can actually
absolutely. I have a lot of married people, a lot of older people like grandparents and all, who message me and tell me, like just I think last month or something it was, a grandmother, a Desi grandmother, she messaged me and she told me that, oh my God, I've been torturing my daughter so much for being divorced. I never knew it was like this, and she never tells me. I said, if you allow her to tell, only she will tell you, right? If you're going to be this person who doesn't listen. So I gave it to her. I never like reduce my voice. I never reduced my stand just because, I always say it as it is. And I told her, how difficult it is to leave a marriage. Just please go back to your daughter and hold her and just tell her it's okay, and figure it out together. That's what a family is for. So she told me, like, I never knew. Now we watch, lives together and we learn things and we're figuring it out. And so a lot of older people also, I know it's like a trickle, effort, or it's a drop in the ocean, but it's okay. At some point it will spread more. I'm just taking on as much as I can take, because I also have a full-time job and a full-time kid. So this is all I can really do as far as Instagram is concerned. It's a lot of work, but yeah, you're right. It's reaching a lot of people who watch my lives, because see, the information is not available for everybody. When you talk about sex education, or when you talk about dyslexia or SLDs, these are information that everybody needs. But I'm just putting it from a single parent perspective to benefit single parents. But other people watch and they save it and they watch it and they share it. So it's okay. It's just keeping information and involving everyone. You're absolutely right. Thanks for saying that.
The best part is, once we heard your story, we've had some really nice comments where people have actually shared their struggle. So yeah, they have, and it's beautiful. You spoke about admission. You spoke about how society looks at you after a divorce. You looked at a certain way.
That's it.
Yeah, it's just about speaking up. I think when one person speaks up, it's kind of like
like I said, it's permission for everybody else to speak up as well and say, oh my God, I can relate to that. I went through the same thing, and it doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter at all. Like, there are women who are like 40, 50, 60 in my group who've just gotten divorced now. And they are, feeling such a release now. Okay, at least now I'm free from that toxicity or whatever. So yeah, it's a very important conversation to be had. Thank you for listening to me, to my TED Talk.
I was just like, God, please don't let this Wi-Fi go again. I cannot use it.
It's getting better. It's getting perfect now. I was just starting trouble.
You rightly said it's a ripple effect. It's a ripple effect. It just needs one person to
make a change.
So this brings us to the end of the chat. Thank you so much, Laila, for daring
to worries. Anytime.
And questioning the whole stigma around single parenting and around divorce. Thank you for starting this community. I'm sure you started it for yourself, and now here you are. Doing it for so many other people, and I think it's absolutely fabulous. And I'm sure all your lawyer skills, whatever you learned as a corporate lawyer, have been used in whatever.
I've never lawyered this much in my life. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Fantastic, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.
To everyone watching us, thank you for being patient. Actually, that goes to me. Thank you for being so patient.
No worries at all. No worries.
I just have one quick announcement to make for our audience, which is that as we all know, Unsuited Season 3 is ongoing, and we have a second episode this Sunday at 5 p.m. The season is dedicated to women in law, and this Sunday we have two fantastic leaders from the legal space joining us. We have Tejal Patil and Aparna Mittal joining. It'll be a super fun conversation with like a lot of inspiration and value. So please don't forget to register for this chat. The registration link is in the bio of our Instagram handle. And Laila, thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm so glad we connected.
Yes.
And I shall see you and I shall see everyone else next week. Until then, have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.